Welcome to our newest episode of the Lebanese Physicians Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Emile Mehanna, who I know very well. I've worked closely with him. We will be discussing today transitioning from clinical medicine into industry with Dr. Mehanna. And of course, our co-host today is Dr. MohammadAli Jardali, whom you all know. So just a short background, Dr. Mehanna. Dr. Mehanna actually finished his medical school at the American University of Beirut, subsequently did a two-year research fellowship at Case Western Reserve University in the great city of Cleveland, and then did a residency and fellowship in cardiology over there, subsequently went to Brown University for an interventional cardiology fellowship, and finally went to Mass General for an endovascular fellowship. And Dr. Mehanna had such a great love for his home country, Lebanon, that he did not waste any time, finished his second interventional fellowship and moved back to LAUMC Rizal Hospital, where I met him and we worked together. And one note is he moved about 4 months before the Lebanese revolution started. So he moved there and the country went, I don't know what he did to the country, but things happened.
No, there was no correlation. I mean, absolutely not. This is not the independent predictor. That's what people tell me. You know, you move there, you destroy a country, and then the blast the following year. I can assure you, I had nothing to do with it.
Correlation is not causation.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Mehanna, can you tell us a bit about, initially, let's start with your decision to move to Lebanon, why it happened, and then tell us a bit about your work at UMCRH.
Absolutely. First, thank you, Khalil, for hosting me here. It's good to see you after this time. Obviously, I left Lebanon, and my intention has always been to come back. I mean, people would tell me, listen, after 1 year of training, 2 years of training, you will change your mind and you will never go back. But actually, I was determined. And then, you know how it is. After you live 10 years in the States, it's a decision you take without much weighing, if you want, objectively options, right? When you're finishing with your American boards, you're finishing with, you know, prestigious institutions, MGH and Boston and Brown. The normal expectation is that you take a job and you start a job and you start your clinical career. Plus, you can tailor the job to what you really like in the States, right? You can go work in a VA, you can work in private practice, and in between, academic, semi-academic. For me, I wanted always to come back. So I did not even open or explore the option because I knew if you get the options, and you evaluate them objectively, that potentially you can take your first job because it's tough to match it, even in the best jobs you can get in Lebanon. So I simply did not apply to Lebanon, to the States. And I said, I'm finishing, I'm going back. And I knew this was coming. So I started working on it before I even finished my fellowship. And truth being said, my last fellowship was almost chosen to serve that purpose. So, you know, I knew I would become an interventional cardiologist, but when I started my mapping 2-3 years before I finished, I knew that no one was trained for these advanced endovascular technique. And then that's why I decided to pursue this extra fellowship so that when I applied to go to Lebanon, I wanted to be competitive in a very competitive job market. So I put somehow institutions in Lebanon, with all my respect to all of them, in tiers if you want. And I said, I want to strive first to get to the American universities. That's how I'm trained. And these are, you know, whether AUB, LAU, you know, I got offers in both, different offers. And then I had other options because the goal was to go back. And it was, again, optimize my chances to get the best I can get in terms of deals and stuff. But at the same time, don't compare it to what I could potentially get in terms of first job in the US, because it will never match in terms of, you know, opportunities. So it was a subjective decision that took some time to execute, but that's how I came back to Lebanon. If that answers a bit, maybe the decision to move before we get into what I did there, if you want.
Right, exactly. And so how was your job at LA? I know we worked there together. And how was your job at the UMC? And how's practice of clinical medicine in Lebanon?
Well, it's different. So Lebanon has been historically, I mean, you know very well, you're aware. Historically, most of the new technologies used to start in the area from Lebanon, right? Where if you go back 20, 30 years ago, most of the innovation that came in interventional cardiology to the MENA area, the Middle East and North Africa, would start in Lebanon. The first drug-eluting stent, rotational atherectomy, carotid stenting, even TAVI. We were among the pioneers. We got TAVI in Lebanon before the US, believe it or not, because the advantage of a Lebanese physician was that he or she would have access to the US and Europe at the same time. So whenever you have a technology, you can somehow shop around and either take it from here or there. So this was what I knew, that I'm going to this system, and I knew that it's different than the US in the sense that even in an academic center, you build your own practice. If I am your cardiologist, you have my cell phone, my WhatsApp number, you will call me 24/7. This was, I knew this was a bit of the expectations. I knew that, I based even my life in Lebanon. I took an apartment attached to the hospital because I'm your cardiologist. I have to come fast if you call me. So I was willing, and again, I knew upfront that I'll be compromising. I cannot work on the cutting edge technologies I was working on. I was not a phone call away from reaching an R&D department in the company that say I'm an expert with, or the imaging technology. I was an expert in imaging, intravascular imaging. So that's somehow the expectation coming into the country. I started working, you adapt. The faster you adapt, the better you're off. And I have to be honest, it was faster and better than expected, my start, I want to say. I was told, hey, listen, come back to Lebanon, no one knows you, you just need to navigate a bit the politics of the institution where you're working. And you do that, there are people that have been there for a number of years. You just need to respect them, learn from them how they do things, while keeping, and that's the core, while keeping your values, and while keeping what you believe in, and while providing the good care and the good medicine you do. So if you combine this respect to the senior people there, while keeping your values and what you learned and how you practiced in the US, and you give this to your patients, people appreciate it. And your best referrer is your patient. So that's how I started. The start was better, but then, as we say in this, then things went south, if you want.
Yeah, I think part of the reason because we were both there together at the same time, and I agree with you, the start was great, but the reason things went south, I think partly was the economic collapse in the country, which led to a limitation in what kind of procedures you can do and the number of procedures you can do on the patients. So
very frustrating. I'll add to this. This is exactly, where the frustration started building up. So I am an expert in imaging, and LAU, even before I came, had invested in this intravascular imaging modality, optical coherence tomography, to launch it. Imagine, we were doing the launch on a big event. We've been working for weeks and months, even before I had transitioned. After I signed my contract in 2019, we were working on this since the beginning of the year, getting top international speakers, because we were launching this. And then we were supposed to do it on the 25th of October. The machine was arriving to Lebanon, I think, and then we were just making, and then of course the revolution started and things started deteriorating. And we couldn't do our event, we couldn't launch our technique, and week after week, month after month, you exactly what you said. You can't, you start really, road closures and everything, patients not getting to the hospital, but more importantly, COVID came. And with COVID, and the economic, it was 3 or 4 things that happened at the same time. Probably COVID was easier. We had the blast, we had the economic issues and the collapse of the system and the devaluation of the of our Lebanese lira, and add to it all the uncertainties in the system. So suddenly you start not do the things that you are supposed to do, right? If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're frustrated. I can't open an imaging catheter. Most of the stuff are not reimbursed, and it causes frustration in your practice. You find yourself, doing, with my respect to every specialty, but I did not train for 17 years, 7 of medicine and 10 plus 2 subspecialties and 3 American board to be giving a cholesterol pill to patient or a blood pressure pill, because I had bigger aspirations. I wanted an imaging center that would be a hub where I train physicians in that part of the world. I mean, this was pre-agreed. I had the sponsors, I had the industry partners willing to sponsor it. But then everyone put their brakes on and they said, you can't do it anymore in Lebanon. We're not supporting that. You want to do it, just go do it in Dubai, go do it in the Gulf. Go give your courses, give your expertise, teach people there. And then frustration was building up. This was, now we're in 2020, right? A year after into my job. And yeah, that's how it went.
Yeah, and so that's probably when you started your contacts with Boston Scientific, right?
Well, it's interesting how it happened. Maybe reaching that stage. So again, after a year and a half in practice, frustration was building, right? And I knew that I could do a practice in Lebanon and I can continue and survive. We've seen the Syrian next to us, Syrian war that started in 2011, and people survived. It was 10 years after that war. Okay, they're compromising. They're doing primary care most of their time, but they're surviving. And this was not the issue. But the frustration was like, for me, it's a career suicide if I don't have access to the technologies I trained to do. If I don't do that, I become, you lose your skills in these advanced techniques. I was doing critical limb ischemia, below the knee interventions, limb saving interventions, and simply I could not do these for multiple reasons, but mostly because these are not reimbursed. And then suddenly you have procedures that cost 30 and 40 grand, and that's too much, and then you had people telling you, just amputate my leg and I'll be okay. So and this was painful, right? I mean, you train, you can't provide what you can do, and again, more frustration. Not only you're not able to do what you do. The finances, it was something to add on top of it, but it was never really the driving factor, because how it is in Lebanon, things adjust. Petit à petit things adjust. But then this is when I took the decision that I'm not, I'm not, becoming that guy that, will be not using that technology and then becoming redundant. And then one day, 10 years from now, someone will come and tell me, hey, listen, you did a great job keeping that ship from sinking, but now here comes the newbie that is newly trained, I mean, and then you are a senior person, but with old techniques, and that's a bad combo. So this is at that time when the options were to go to the Gulf. I was proctoring a lot, and for those not familiar with that concept, proctoring is when you're an expert in a technique or a technology, usually the industry companies are interested in educating physicians about it. So I used to go and teach about this imaging modality. I did Kuwait, I did Saudi Arabia, I did Dubai, Abu Dhabi, I did Bahrain, some of them remotely also because COVID was hitting at that time. So between face-to-face or COVID remotely. So I was getting a lot of job offers in the Gulf. Very honestly, and again, I'm a very honest person. Neither my wife nor myself were willing to move again the family. And this applied also to the States, because when the blast happened in 2020, I got calls from my mentors in the US. I said, like, come back, your job is ready. You left, you didn't want to consider it before, but now you you survived a blast and you almost died a few weeks ago. Come back, But again, put yourself in my shoes. I had moved to Lebanon a year ago, 2019, and you're asking me with my wife and my two kids. I had two young kids, and then you tell me back and leave. It was too soon to happen. And then out of nowhere, literally, again, I was very close to industry in general because I was proctor for three different companies. I was a proctor for Abbott, for Shockwave, for CSI. And then, ironically, I remember it very well. It was October. So here we're talking a year and a half, roughly, after I had come back. I had taken the decision that it's time, this is, tough times for Lebanon at the peak of the problems. From November, I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Boston Scientific. And I remember very well, I was at the beach and then, late summer.
At Sporting? At Sporting or?
What was that?
Were you at Sporting or?
Oh, no. Actually, I was at Aqua. I was at Aqua with the kids. So I remember, why do I remember it very well? Sometimes memories got stuck. No, I was not in Sporting. So my kids were playing and I had kept my cell phone in my pocket. So I was like my back to the sea so that if one of my 3 or 4-year-old are sinking, I throw them back on the beach, So I was like, the defense line, not to avoid them deciding to swim to Cyprus. And I got a call from one of my friends and Rafa Cavalcante. Rafa, basically, I had met years ago in Cleveland. He was an interventional cardiologist. And then he had done his PhD after that in the Netherlands, practiced in Brazil, and then got recruited in 2016 to Boston Scientific in Latin America. 2018, he got promoted to Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And when I moved back to Lebanon, we reconnected also because I was now in his territory. And he said, hey, Emile, I got promoted. I'm becoming the global vice president for Boston Scientific. I'm moving to Boston. Do you want my job? So, of course, you put yourself in my shoes. I did not want to go to the States. I was not ready. My wife was not very supportive to go and move entirely, the entire family to the Gulf either. I said, it's something that I wanted to do all my life, but I thought I'd be doing it in my 50s or 60s, industry. I said something when my kids go to college, and my back will be hurting from all the time wearing lead in the procedures, I'll take this sort of job. But suddenly, and then, I remembered one of my mentors. He used to say, you're never too young, it's never too early. My mentors in the States. I said, you know what? The opportunity is coming. Why not? Let's explore it. So I went all in, of course, he told me, he just told me there's an opening, but it doesn't work this way in industry. I had to do 7 interviews, and many months, because again, of things and HR and the paperwork. And now there is, some slowing down of hiring. And now it's, and long story short, I got offered the job in April of 2021. This is, So of course I gave my 2-month notice and I took a sabbatical. I took an unpaid leave. I said, okay, what's my worst case scenario? I try it. This is now June 2021. Lebanon is in a crisis. I'll try it. I'll take a sabbatical. If I like it, that's great. If I don't, I have it. The job market will be better because, we were all expecting COVID will be done. And then, I had reached out to some friends and everyone was saying the same thing. And B, with my job, I will have visibility and contacts that I can also leverage when I look for my next job. So that's when I started as Director of Medical Affairs for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Boston Scientific Interventional Cardiology. And this is now June 2021. And from there, you can go maybe over details if you're interested, but I simply loved what I was doing. And then because I loved it, I then, I said to the people at LAU, I'm not coming back. I fully resigned. And here I am, a year and a half almost later, I'm also overseeing, as of this September now, all the medical education at Boston Scientific. So I started with medical affairs and now it's medical affairs and med ed.
Right. All right.
So this was, thank you for sharing all this with us. I was gonna ask you next if you have any regrets about leaving traditional clinical care, but I guess you kind of touched on it, talking us through your thought process about making the switch from clinical practice to industry.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a simple person in the sense that I don't lie to myself. You know, I keep it simple. I said I'll try it on a sabbatical, and if I regret it or I don't like it, I'll just back up. You know, I'm on unpaid leave. But there's no regrets in say. It's the opposite, because I see the opportunities in what I'm doing. I'm happy. Again, I don't lie to myself before lying to others. You know, I'm happy. I'm enjoying it. I have a lot of opportunities of growth within the industry. And again, maybe some people ask your question differently. Some people ask me, hey, don't you miss clinical medicine? You know, and I tell you very honestly, the part that probably I miss is being behind the cath lab table and doing your cardiac catheterization, the procedural part. But do I miss seeing patients in the clinic and getting the WhatsApp calls and the phone calls at 2 a.m. because, or, you know, the two people, again, I told you how it works in Lebanon, you know, two people just on a lunch on Sunday discussing if which blood pressure pill is better and calling you, you know, just to ask you this question. I don't miss that at all, you know. But if you tell me just be, you know, do you miss being standing on the cath lab table and doing a procedure? That's the only part potentially I miss. But again, it's way, you know, like if you want over exceeded by the happiness I'm having in my job.
So how was the transition, I guess, to industry?
Yeah,
because I mean it's a completely different. Like some people call it the dark. Some clinicians call it the dark side, but it's not the dark side for sure. But so how was the transition over there, and how did you adapt?
It's fun actually, you know, because like when I used to introduce myself to these physicians, when I, you know, I used to say, you know, before crossing to the dark side, and everyone would laugh, and except my boss was like, no, it's the bright side on this side. Anyway, so I'll tell you, to talk about this transition, it was initially when I transitioned, there was a part that was unknown to me. You know, if you tell me, Emile, what will you be doing? Although I had asked these questions in interviews, but what will you be doing on June 1st, 2021? I was not sure. So there was one part that I said, I'm doing it. That's it, let's go. Because the day-to-day work, you know, I started in the middle of a pandemic, you know, so what do I do? What is medical affairs even, right? I mean, now I can explain it. Now I can, you know, I recruit people to my team. I'm recruiting, I have a big team now, and then, but truly that transition, what is it? Maybe before we talk about it, what do I do? What is medical affairs? That's probably things that people don't know. You know, I didn't know very well. So in the end, when you talk about Boston Scientific Interventional Cardiology, first to give you a sense how big is Boston, we're talking 42,000 employees, 12 billion of revenue last year. So a huge company, right? 6 divisions. The biggest one, the historical one, and you know, the one that funded Boston Scientific is interventional cardiology. So in medical affairs and medical education, we don't do the commercial arm. Okay, we're not the commercial arm. We don't do sales. We don't do marketing. You know, people tell me, do you sell stents? I don't, you know. So what I do in these, I am taken in my position. I'm the highest physician in the company in Europe, Middle East, Africa. And I was appointed in the company because I'm an interventional cardiologist to be able to do these peer-to-peer discussions in the line of work I do. And what are the things I do? In medical affairs, we are responsible for the investigator-initiated research, the evidence generation for our technologies. So Professor Diab once is a cardiologist, let's say, and is interested in studying our stent, you know, our coronary stent, and doing the trial on, I don't know, ladies that are above 75 with chronic kidney disease, and he wants to check if dual antiplatelet with these medications, I'm saying whatever, right? Or let's go more tangible. Today we're talking about interventions, but we are advocates of modern PCI or modern percutaneous coronary intervention. At its core is the use of intravascular imaging and using new technologies and new techniques to improve your stent implantation. You need to generate evidence that a modern approach is better, right? So I am in the department, and my team basically is the one responsible for the investigator-initiated research. So we sit with you, we discuss your research idea, we see if we fund it or not. So we have, when I joined, we had 59, I can give you the numbers of last year, about 50 trials that we are responsible of overseeing, investigator-initiated, right? And the trials are from 10,000 euros of budget to 7 million euros. Okay, so, and small trials sometimes are, just to answer a simple question, big trials are aiming to change guidelines, right? And that's, so we do this part. A second thing we do is the medical education part. And in medical affairs, the medical education is the conference education. So, you go to the American College of Cardiology, there is a symposium, right? That is the sponsored symposium. You always see these in conferences, We decide who speaks, the agenda, what they're addressing, this is our team that does that. Again, we are the medical expert in the company. The third thing we do is data dissemination. So data dissemination, when you do a trial and we publish it, right? How to tell your marketeer what message they need to bring out. So you have to tell them what's important and what's not, and then they can do their marketing thingy, right? They can just give the message and tell them this is why it's important and go for it. And they go and you see them, you receive all the messages after. But also we disseminate data internally. We need to empower our sales force. Again, the big functions in a company like Boston, the 42,000 employees are the production and the sales and marketing. It's not medical affairs who are the support function that make sure, that things happen. So we do this data dissemination internally. And last but not least, our role is to do this key opinion leader engagement to make sure, we can influence guidelines, we can influence messages on the podium and so forth. So that's a big chunk of what we do in medical affairs. And on the medical education side, we are responsible for all the educational journeys, to build the journeys of education, on our devices, on PCI, on valvular, on our TAVI, on our Watchman left appendage closure device, So that's what we do. So you see a bit, we're not commercial, we are the medical people, and a day can be done, I cover a big area, right, with my team. So I have conference call, you tell me what is your day like, right? I have conference calls, I'm never on call, so I don't work Saturday, Sunday. In my role, I sometimes work a bit later than the 5 p.m. because I take calls sometimes with the US, but 6, 7 p.m., not more than that. I travel, and when I travel, people ask me, why do you travel? I travel because either I'm attending a conference, I have meetings with investigators, I have, or an educational activity we're doing, an advisory board we're running, we are running the advisory board, of course, in collaboration with marketing, with other functions, or, the rest of time I'm home-based. So whenever I have access to a computer, I can do my work. And then that's your answer. The toughest part initially was like May 31st, I'm running in the hospital, answering phone calls, pre-op consults, cath lab. On June 1st, I'm in the front of the computer doing again, it was COVID. So that's a long, again, answer, but trying to cover every aspect of, what I do, how I transition, and what I am now. I hope it's a bit, gives some clarity to the type of work we do.
I think so.
No, this is fascinating. So the next question I want to ask you, if you can maybe tell us more about where you see the future of biotech going, and what are the biggest challenges that you see, especially that you said you started in the middle of the pandemic, and that was a weird place maybe to start your new role. But now, as we go out of the pandemic, where do you see things moving?
This is a great question. So first of all, let's talk a bit about the challenges we're facing today as industry in general, and then later we can talk about the prospects. So if you look at us, the big threes in interventional cardiology, we're doing really well on our growth, on our like our education and our sales and all that. But today, like anything in the world, the challenges is coming from the increase, the inflation, the cost of goods that are increasing. And that's really what's putting challenges on us and making us decide on our strategies to go forward. Now, it's important for me per se, I don't do the commercial again, but the ability to invest in clinical trials relies on this margin, is how much you have margin, the extra money, because we invest in Boston Scientific $1 billion of our revenue in R&D. So that's huge if you think about it, per year. And this ability to invest is critical for us. And that's why I'm mentioning the challenges to try to answer your question. Where do we see ourselves going in the field again? And we cannot generalize, right? I mean, we cannot say, of course, there is a big role if you talk to companies, I don't know, talking a bit about remote monitoring of patient, all these things. You have already, like big, you see all the big players, Amazon, yesterday there was a leak on what Amazon Health would be like. And then, Google getting into Facebook, getting into the business of medicine somehow, so all of them. So I will not, it's a very broad question to try to limit where the field is going. But we can maybe talk a bit about ourselves, about how we're seeing, the field going. In the three franchises I work in, structural heart valves, TAVIs, we are, or the interventional cardiology, we are heading toward, again, more modernization of the way we put stents. People have been getting coronary stents for a while, right? But using new imaging modalities, new softwares that are automated, linked to, if you look at an intervention, how it used to be done. You do an angiogram, a 2D, X-ray, you see a bit of stenosis on the vessel, you go and you implant a stent and think it's good. But this was how we used to do it in the 90s and 2000s. The modern way of doing it is take an imaging catheter, an intravascular ultrasound catheter, go inside the vessel, measure exactly the vessel size, length properly your stent, expand properly your stent, And again, where is the field going, to answer you exactly? It's towards more automation on this. So imagine you do an imaging and it tells you not only where you land your stent, how big your stent should be. It gives you an idea of the physiology after your stent. And imagine when you link it to AI and all this machine learning and all these massive data, you will know if you put a stent in the proximal LAD, if that patient will live or die, because that's really, and how longer, it will allow you to prognosticate. Again, are we there yet? No, you're not there yet. But this is where we're moving in the world of PCI, of intervening, on patient. And this is where the investments are going. And this gives you a visibility on the next years. And the TAVI, TAVI, when it started, the valve was to treat the people that are not candidate for operations. But today the world is changing. We're treating low-risk patient, intermediate-risk patient, and today most of our work is with our platform, the Accurate Neo2, is to create or to find the best lifetime management for patients with aortic stenosis. And this is where a lot of our resources are going. In the old days, when you treat an 80 or 90-year-old, you don't care about reaccessing the coronary arteries and to treat them. But if you're treating a 50, you expect this patient to live 30 years and to have. So this is where we're moving. Our field is moving towards more technological advancement, more automation, definitely a presence of AI on the imaging for sure. And again, more advancement in more to be able to do minimally invasive surgeries in safer ways. Today, when you change your aortic valve, it used to be open heart. Today, TAVI is becoming the standard of care. But we still have the tricuspid valve, we still have the mitral valve, and we need better solutions for these. So I'm not sure if I answered you this way. I didn't, because again, each field of industry can tell you where they're going. But at least in interventional cardiology, that's the future for sure.
This was very, very good to get your insight. I guess as a follow-up question, I would want to know, do you see, because you were talking about transformation and changes in the field, do you see more care happening outside the hospital maybe? So maybe in the clinic, and maybe in the future going to where the patients are, maybe at home, or like a hybrid model of some sort?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And yes, I think, the idea is really the way, at least in interventional cardiology, is even we're moving, and I'm talking interventional cardiology, is to bring to the cath lab and you want ideally to bring to the cath lab and to the hospital the patient that needs intervention, and intervention that ideally would prolong their life, right? Or make them live better or live longer, right? And that's where a lot of, if you are trying to move the need that in that aspect, what you can do outside, or preventing the admissions, or screening as outpatient, or following as outpatient with devices, heart failure monitoring devices, CT angiographies to screen the coronaries before you come to the hospital. The only not caveat, but the only thing in interventional cardiology is we do treat heart attacks. And yes, you try to prevent them with medication, but once a heart attack comes, you need to go and treat it on the spot. So the field overall, for sure, all these gadgets you're having, right, are to screen people and try to keep them away from the hospital. And ideally, you've seen how many in cardiology tools you have today, right? From monitoring of EKGs on Apple Watch, on devices, on portable. Your pulmonary, I know Khalil does that, but pulmonary artery pressure by small implantable devices to prevent your heart failure, catch the people before they decompensate, prevent them from going to the hospital. So the field is growing to like it's never, like it has never grown before. So I see, ideally, hopefully, less people going, or at least trials to prevent the people that should not end up in the hospital from getting to the hospital. But once they get there, it's basically a better triage that is done outside, so that when you go inside, you treat and you're more concentrated. And definitely, complexity of disease will get in coronary artery disease, and the treatments we provide will be more complex, because again, people are living longer, and that comes with its own, if in the old days you were treating a 50 or 60-year-old, today when these people get to 90, their arteries are calcified. The complexity when you treat them is going to be more difficult. So this is why we need to be equipped with tools to treat the complex, and whether complex PCI or complex valvular disease.
Yeah, so basically, now I'm going to just transition to your role, because you're the Director of Medical Affairs and Medical Education for Europe and the MENA region. So that's a huge swath of land and a huge number of countries that are very different from each other. Do you see that countries, it's very interesting because the world is moving upwards. I think a lot of the economies are moving upwards at this point. Do you see that these countries are moving at the same pace towards adopting these new technologies, or do you think still that, let's say, European countries or Western European countries are moving faster than the others, or is it interesting that all of them are moving at the same pace at this point?
Yeah, that's a great one also, Khalil, because that's actually, I don't know, you should be defining strategies with us at Boston. So feel free to join us or something, but I'll give you a bit of an insight, how we divide my territory, because it's a huge territory. And again, the differences are huge. Let's start first by talking about a geographical division, because it has implication on how the world is moving in these, okay? In my area, we have five division, five, if you want, area, subdivision. They're not area. We call them the Northern Cluster, which is all the Scandinavian countries, UK, France, that's one cluster. The Southern Cluster, Italy, Portugal, Spain, that's, southern. Central Cluster, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. I'm just naming some, but just to give you a location so you can orient them on the map. And the Eastern Cluster, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland. This is one part. This is if you want traditional Europe or old Europe. And we have something we call the GEM, the growth emergent market, which also by itself has 5 areas, starting from Russia, Armenia. This is the first Eurasia, we call it, Ukraine, Belarus. Second one is the Southeast Europe. So ex-Yugoslavia, if you want, Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Montenegro. That's the second one. Then you have Middle East, North Africa, traditional Middle East, North Africa. Oh, I skipped TCA, Turkey, Central Asia, all the way to Pakistan. Middle East, North Africa, which is the Gulf countries, the Levant, Lebanon, Syria, and these neighboring countries, as well as North Africa. And the last one is SSA, or Sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa. And we are present as Boston Scientific in 9 countries outside of South Africa, Botswana, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana. So I'm naming these countries to tell you there is a huge discrepancies where each one is in the therapy and the access to therapies in interventional cardiology and the access to resources. You cannot compare, they're not apple to apple comparisons when you say Germany and Uganda. They're not. And that's why, maybe one important thing, because you're talking about like our growth and everything. So the biggest growing area in the world, when you consider Boston Scientific, when you all comers, US, Asia Pacific, Latin America, is actually the GEM, the growth emergent market, the 5 last territories I mentioned, from Russia all the way to South Africa. This is the biggest growth, meaning that people are adopting, they're avid to get the new technologies, and we're growing. We're not the biggest, right? I mean, US is biggest, Europe, Asia Pacific. Again, I gave you a sense of the whole net income for a year is 12 billion. So you can imagine like the size of these areas. But what is definitely peculiar is, tell me how we can do it. What's peculiar about us in interventional cardiology, and then is the way we approach it. When I was asked, hi, when I came to the job, it's like, what's your strategy, for these countries? I told them, first of all, I cover EMEA. It's not just the first E. We don't stop at the first E. It's Europe, Middle East, and Africa, meaning that, and we cover, we should be present in these countries in medical education, in medical affairs. While yes, research structures are not as developed and, in the Middle East or in Africa than the Central Europe, but the need for education is present everywhere. So how to do medical affairs there is to try to provide the same quality, depending on the needs of the local markets, and that's why in our jobs, we don't work in silos. We are very much aligned with our business partners, with our marketing partners to see, okay, what's your priority for this country? What do you want to do there? And let's build it together and let's work on it together. So again, to answer you, huge discrepancies in these territories, but then there is always a need to educate, but maybe, and definitely the biggest discrepancy is going to be in the research. We don't have strong research structures outside of Central Europe in this, but we are building them. And that's the role of us as industry, is to find the right partners. That's why we are launching now, actually, we just signed our contract for a TAVI trial in the Gulf area and the Middle East, and that's how, step by step, you build a research structure and you nurture it so that it can support, your growth.
It shows how passionate you are about medical education. I know you started a residency, I think, in LAU, right?
Fellowship.
Yes, yeah, fellowship program. You're right. So I started the fellowship program there. I mean, that was part of my recruitment when the guys got me here, was to start that, but I'm passionate about education because I truly believe, and this is like the non-commercial, I'm not a commercial person, but I truly believe, you tell me what was your biggest incentive to leave? Imagine yourself, I am a believer of modern PCI, frustrated I can't do this. And suddenly I have the opportunity as in my role, I have the platform to educate every cardiologist of Europe, the Middle East and Africa and Central Europe, and you name it, to do what I believe in. And this was for me the biggest incentive. How many patients can you treat per day? If you're, I don't know, 30, if you are Khalil Diab, you do 50 because you're Superman, but imagine you can teach this or implement it, this technique and this modern PCI thinking or this TAVI story to 10 physicians per country, just 10. Can you imagine the impact you can have? And that's what's really, what keeps me, motivated, because you can make the difference. And after all, why are you making the difference? For your patients, right? You're making this for your patient lives longer, and you do better intervention and you improve the care. And that's the drive. That's why we did medicine to start with.
So, Emile, what are your, future endeavors at this point, going from here? And then my next question is, I actually admire you. You were able to stay in Lebanon despite everything that happened. So do you plan to stay in Lebanon long term at this point too? That's the next part of the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I took the job, I was given 5 options in Europe, and I decided to opt for France. But now that we decided not to move the family, we decided, to change and move my contract. But I'm happy. I'm very happy in what I'm doing. So, long-term plans, yes, I will try to stay in Lebanon as long as I can. Meaning, as long as it's livable. We had tough times. 2020, 2021 were tough. I'm not saying 2022 is better, but you know how it is in Lebanon. You adjust. And super honestly, yes, we're not people driven by the finances, but once your work and your income is not related at all to Lebanon, you become like almost on continuous vacation. You're working in Lebanon, but you don't have to deal with the stressful parts of working in Lebanon, right? Of the lack of resources, the frustration of the day-to-day, the stuff that you don't like to do. So medium to long-term plans, I'm very happy in industry. I'm not planning to go back to practice anytime soon. Did I rule it out for the future? No. So for the time being, I'm just exploring. I'm learning by the day. I'm happy again at Boston Scientific, and I'm, my immediate 2023 plan is the new educational journey we're building for in Boston, and that's gonna be huge. Almost a catered education to your needs in a journey that starts with multiple touch points. From the moment you encounter something online to the remote support we can provide to all this. That's really the top priority. Longer term, there's so much. We didn't have the time to talk about the growth, but there's so much possibility within industry to grow. So again, also maybe last point I will say, I am recruiting an interventional cardiologist next year in my team for the Middle East, North Africa. So if you know someone who's interested, send them my way. That's my story. That's how it started. That's what made me come to industry. Life is simple. I don't like to complicate it. Be genuine to yourself. The opportunity came, I took it. It came at the time I needed it. Had it come 1 year earlier or later, probably I would not have taken it. I would have been settled in a new job, or I was still, in my early practice in Beirut. It's a context. Opportunity came, don't think too much. And I work by the motto, my late dad used to tell me, if you do your thing, do it properly or don't do it. So that's why I say, if you guys, whoever is watching, if they're interested or you're exploring jobs in industry, something outside of traditional medicine, again, I was passionate about medicine, what, Khalid? I didn't do it, I love what I do, and I still love what I do. It's not that you don't have to be, good in one to do one, or vice versa. So, but once you do your thing, do it properly or don't do it.
Right, and I think, I think these days, as all of us know, medicine is not only clinical medicine. I think there's a lot of expansion going on, be it in industry, be it in insurance, be it in administrative processes, consulting. So people should not be wrapped up in like one way of doing things in medicine. But thank you, Emile, for being with us on the podcast. And I think it was great. It was probably one of the longest podcast we've recorded so far, and it was.
You have to chop some of it, or
otherwise
otherwise people won't watch it. Thank you. It was a pleasure, really, to have me with you. Maybe the last career of medicine you did not mention is politicians. So please, Khalil, if you're bored in the States, come back and run into politics here as a physician. We'll have chances.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day, evening, wherever you are in the world. And thanks again for having me on your podcast.
Thanks.